Even though the Kirby franchise is definitely a popular one, you might notice if you poked around the stacks that the appreciation he receives is almost exclusively an aesthetic one. Getting anybody to seriously talk about how the games play is like pulling teeth, and that needs to end because many of them, to me, are a masterclass in amazing game design. I can't think of a better example than my favorite Kirby game of all time, Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. Main series games for Kirby were often single-level sequential platformers, but to accommodate for Kirby's diverse moveset and adaptable playstyle, creator Masahiro Sakurai of HAL Laboratories created levels that were more omnidirectional than your average jumping Mario. When the time came for Flagship, who got handed the reins from HAL Laboratory in the early aughts to make a new Kirby game, the decision was made to build on Kirby's omnidirectional levels and try something new, an interconnected, omnidirectional world map that grows as the player explores. If you play a lot of games, you may recognize this description as one of the classic features of a Metroidvania. And you also know that Metroidvanias are like really hard, not just to play, but to make. Because the more and more a map grows, the greater distance players have to traverse to get to their next goal, and the more likely they are to get lost. The way the Flagship team, led by Tomoaki Fukui, managed to get around this problem is just fabulous. After a brief tutorial and cutscene, Kirby starts Amazing Mirror out in a central hub. This place is its own level and is going to be the starting point of the entire game's core loop. In Amazing Mirror, the cycle of action is strongly linked to where you go. So throughout play, Kirby is sent back again and again to this central hub, and when he does so, it always marks the start of a new core loop. It's kinda like a roguelite, but without the randomness. To get to other parts of the map, Kirby travels through mirrors, an upgraded version of a door from past games. There's only one door available at the beginning, but as Kirby explores the map, he'll go through hundreds of doors and eventually stumble upon this, a giant button. These giant buttons unlock a new door for Kirby to access from the hub, and it's also one of the key ways players progress. When you step back, you see the world map is vaguely oriented like a giant spider's web, radiating out from the central hub. Every time Kirby returns to the hub, he can pick which zone or branch of the web he wants to start out from again. And from there, he chooses his steadily growing options of places to go as he moves outward. Technically, he can traverse to any zone from the world map, but it requires some tedious circumnavigation, and it's much easier to just start at a door from the hub that's closer. That means going into a door from the hub allows players to direct their own adventure, even though the path they really take will never be exactly the same. Oh, and by the way, discovering new zones is so freaking clever. So check it. 1 minute, Kirby's gallivanting about, exploring these simple woods, until, hang on, what's this? A castle. The designers made it so that those big shiny buttons almost always exist within their own zone. So Kirby will press it, and from there, he has the option to explore this new area he discovered, or keep going in the original direction the player had planned for him. Whatever happens, when he reaches his goal and gets transported back to the hub, starting a new cycle of the core loop, he can now enter that new zone from its starting point. And that means discovering a zone sets up the next cycle of a core loop before the first one is even finished. The player always has something to look forward to. It's so fucking cool and clever. And I cannot deal. The map's spiderweb shape encourages Kirby to move outward, but more than that, it's reinforced by using the one-way door. Most of the doors in this game can be traveled through from either side, but occasionally designers threw in a special kind of one-way door, which allows Kirby to pass through without being able to go back to the previous room. This meant that while players could generally plan out their route and go wherever they liked, they were always subtly being guided to the outermost edges of the spiderweb. So here's the big question. What happens when Kirby reaches the edge of the map? More often than not, Kirby encounters a mini-game where he gets lots of bonus power-ups. Occasionally, though, he'll encounter the big bosses of the game. Defeating them gives Kirby a mirror shard, which he'll use to unlock the final level. Whether a mini-game, boss win, or lose, Afterwards, Kirby is always sent back to the central hub. The exact same action can either say to the player, "Yay, I did it, time to start a new adventure," or if they died, "Darn it, I've got to try again." But the player always has something to look forward to, and most important of all, they never get lost in pursuit of their next goal. Not to drag Metroidvanias through the mud again, but this never happens in those maps. The player sometimes starts again from a checkpoint if they die, but especially if they win, they sort of just have to sit right where they are in a giant chamber with like the corpse of the boss they just killed, and most of the time, they have to take time figuring out what to do next. It's very cold, and sometimes this works with the environment the game is in, but yeah, probably wouldn't have worked with Kirby. I mean, I guess he does sit with the corpse of a boss and then he eats it, which is really fucked up, but ignore that. Creator Masahiro Sakurai himself said Kirby was always meant to be an easy game that anyone can play, but as Sakurai came to learn, making an easy game is not actually easy. Intuitively, you know that if a game throws you into challenges you aren't prepared for, or punishes you too harshly when you fail, you're gonna stop playing. You could say the game's difficulty has spiked comparable to your skill, and your flow was interrupted. And that's why designers are so impressed by difficult games that people can't stop playing, because it's a sign that that designer has done a great job. And that's partially the reason why I love Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. It isn't a difficult game, but it is an easily playable version of a difficult kind of map. Thanks for watching the video, guys. Don't forget to support me on Patreon. I'm really hoping to someday make a career out of this research and making my games and stuff. One of the reasons I want to keep talking about games like Kirby that most people don't really pay attention to is it was actually really hard to find information about how this game was made. In fact, there really wasn't any at all besides like weird little tidbits that you get from books and anniversary editions of the games and stuff. It took me probably 2 or 3 months to discover who the creator of the game was. I mean, it lists his name, but I didn't know who he was as a person. I found him on Twitter. I think I asked him for an interview, or I may have just have personally insulted him. Who knows? Tomoaki Fukui never gave an interview about the creation of Kirby, and I couldn't figure out, how this game was designed or how they came to take a look at it. Like, for example, I didn't know that if they even looked at Metroidvanias at all for inspiration or what their design process was. Plenty of people have also speculated that this game was meant to be maybe a spiritual successor to The Great Cave Offensive, which was a sub-game in Kirby Superstar. And, it had also an omnidirectional kind of interconnected map. It was much smaller, of course, but I could totally see, the inspiration coming from that. But the truth is, we just don't know for sure. And, the more time goes on, the less and less I think I'm ever going to hear something about it. Because, yeah, this is just a game that is only appreciated for its aesthetics. And that kind of sucks because there's more to it, obviously. That's the end of this episode. In conclusion, I would like to say you should definitely try drinking your tea with whipped cream on it. It's really good.
The reason I wear pink is it's very simple. First, I like the color, and second, I like flowers.